While we've got the backs of the heels on the wall and the legs stretched pretty straight, just separate them a little bit more, somewhere between shoulder and hip distance apart. And then that way we can roll onto the outer edges of our heels, rolling the legs out, and then trying to roll and rotate the legs in. So try to do this movement without any change in the bend in your knee. Okay, so keeping the legs as straight as they are while you're turning out and while you're turning in. And it doesn't matter if the big toes can come and touch together, that's not the point. What matters is you're just noticing how much outward rotation you have in each leg and how much inward rotation you have in each leg. And we're trying to really concentrate on feeling this movement into the hips. So right where those thigh bones sit into the pelvis. Not anywhere else. So notice whether your low back is lifting or moving, whether your ribs are getting involved. You might even notice a discrepancy in between each leg. For me, my right leg has more outward rotation than my left, and less inward rotation than my left. Okay, and then see if you can center the backs of your heels to the wall. So you're neither rotated out nor rotated in, okay? And you might bring your feet in a tiny bit closer now, maybe more like hip distance apart. Okay, so now your knees and your toes are pointing straight back. Let's bring the thumbs into these hip creases and try to keep feeling your tailbone heavy towards the floor. So I'm gonna do this, just the tiniest little tip of the pelvis forward. And your sitting bones are pressing into this block or the wall, or just moving equally towards the wall if you don't have any support or feedback there. Okay, so with the hands resting into these hip creases, let's try, see what happens as we lift the right leg off the wall and then bring it back towards the wall. Let's try the other leg. And as you keep that going, notice if your ribs want to lift. Can you keep them heavy? Can you keep the shoulders relaxed? Okay, so I've got my thumbs sort of resting on my front ribs, fingers resting into those hip creases, because I'm also trying to avoid, when I lift the one leg, I'm trying to avoid lifting and hiking that hip up away from the floor, or up towards the shoulder, okay? So there's no movement in my pelvis at all when I'm lifting each leg away from the wall. So if it's just even the smallest little movement, you know, don't be too concerned with how much movement others are getting, you know, myself. Just notice what you're able to feel without moving or involving much of anything else in your body. There's obviously some involvement in the core to keep some of that stability there, but that's pretty much it. Okay, and then let's see what happens when we lift this right leg as much away from the wall as it can, and then can we bend that knee and place the foot on the wall? And then stretch it and bring it back to the wall. So lift the leg towards you, bend the knee, resting the foot to the wall, stretch through the leg again, and then bring the foot back to the wall. Moving the foot away from the wall without involving the hip, the pelvis, the waist. Bending the knee, bringing it down as low as it can go without you having to struggle. Stretch again through the leg and bring it back to the wall. Let's find that again on the other side. So we do similar things like this when we're sitting in a seated position. But they're a lot harder in a sense because our spine is no longer supported. Whereas here, when we're laying on our back, our spine is supported ideally through its natural curves. So that's why we're not forcing our hips close to the wall, where our low back will end up rounding and flexing towards the floor, and where our pelvis will posteriorly tilt like this. Okay? And the head and the shoulders are all in the same line. It's a really lovely way to support this length and neutral spine while finding the movement and the flexion through the pelvis, or sorry, through the hip joint. Okay, so now let's take the feet a little wider apart. Wider than shoulder distance for sure, but don't go to your edge. Like, it's not about finding the stretch. This is me finding the stretch, just hanging out. Let's not go there. Take it into a controlled V shape where you're still able to connect with the sacrum on the ground, where you're still able to connect with the back ribs on the floor, and you're relaxed and heavy through the neck, through the head, shoulders soft. Okay, you can feel free if you find it helpful for a little feedback. Hands can rest on your body. Okay, so now let's lift again this right leg. So our leg's at a bit more of an angle, and then lift the left leg and bring it back. And just do that a couple times, noticing how different this feels. It might feel a little different in and around the inner thighs, the outer hips even. Just notice for yourself what it is you're feeling. And then this time, let's bend the knee and bring the foot to the floor. How does that feel in that hip? Straighten the leg, bring it back to the wall. Lift the leg, bend the knee, bring the foot to the wall. If I say floor, I mean wall. I hope you know that by now. Stretch through the leg and then bring it back to the wall. Let's try it again. So notice how the pelvis might want to shift around. Keep the sitting bones moving into the wall or that block or towards that wall as you lift the leg. Whew, yeah. And then bend the knee. Any amount to bring that foot to the floor, even if it's up here. Okay, be honest with yourself. Straighten the leg again or stretch it, and then bring it back down to the wall. Lift the other leg. Bend that knee enough to bring the foot to the wall as best you can. Try not to lift that left sitting bone when you straighten the leg again and bring the legs back to the wall. Just rest for a couple breaths with the legs above you, or if you've had enough of legs straight, you can have the knees bent for a few breaths. Okay.